Hi, and welcome to Mark and Rush's podcast. As you might guess, I'm Mark. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about growing up in the 1970s in America. Specifically about my first car and the role that a car plays in a young American guy's life. I hope that after you watch this video, you'll have a better understanding of this period of time in the USA. The year was 1973 and I got my first car. While this is a picture of the model, year, and even color of my first car, I don't have any photos of the actual car. I guess that I was too busy living to take time for photos. The car was a 1963 Oldsmobile Super 88 and was about 10 years old when I bought it in 1973. In America, I was able to get my driver's license when I turned 16 years old. I was actually able to do driver's training when I was 15 years old in 10 months. That was the law then, and as far as I know now, it is still the law today. Actually, let me go back in time a bit earlier here. In 1973, I turned 16 years old, which is a really important birthday for an American. This is because you can now get your driver's license. Truth be told, I actually started driving about a year and a half earlier. When my parents would go somewhere together in my father's car, I would take the keys from my mother's bright red 1967 Volkswagen convertible and go joyriding around town with my two younger brothers. The car was a manual shift. When it came time for my father to teach me to drive at 15 years and 10 months, and yes, your parents could teach you to drive, and you didn't need to go to a driver's school, he was amazed to see what a natural driver I was. The first time he and I got into the car to drive, I was able to drive and shift gears like a pro. Of course, he never found out that I had been driving my mother's car for more than a year already. Just a little note on this car. Yeah, these old Volkswagens look pretty funny, but you could go anywhere with these cars. They were economical, and you could go anywhere at all. I mean, through the forest didn't matter. They were like rugged little Jeeps, although they were just two-wheel drive. They had the engine in the back, which gave that car much better traction, so it was really good in the snow. Plus, it was a convertible. Anyhow, back to my first car again. My first car was a lucky find for me. It's what we call an old man's car. By this I don't mean that it was only for old men, but rather that it was owned by an old man. A co-worker of my father told my father that his dad had just bought a new car and wanted to get rid of his old one, which he had bought new in 1963. He wasn't interested in the money, but he just wanted to sell it to someone who would like it and use it. I mean, he bought the thing new, he'd grown attached to the car, he had it for 10 years. I can understand it. To make a long story short, I met the old guy. He liked me and sold me the car for $50. This was a great deal, and the car ran perfectly. I've had more than 20 cars in my lifetime, but this $50 car is still my favorite. We would refer to a car such as this as a sleeper, and this car was absolutely a sleeper. For guys of my generation, modern cars are a joke in terms of power. We feel real pity when we see young people drive around in a souped-up modern car. We wouldn't be caught dead in such an underpowered little toy in our days. Living in Russia, it is especially funny to see a little Lada police car, just a little kid's toy without any power at all. I think that a person could outrun one of these, and I'm sure that a horse could. A large part of the mystique and power that American policemen held, well, I mean apart from their cool cowboy-type hats, was the big, powerful rocket of a car that they would drive, typically a special police model of a big old Ford Crown Victoria, or Crown Vic. Yeah, I grew up in the best days for cars, where the muscle car was king, and at that time Japanese cars were poorly built, cheap tin cans, really little pieces of crap you didn't want to be caught dead driving in, and the quality was bad. My, how the world has changed, though. The true beauty of this car was its engine, which was one of the most powerful of its time. Not to get too technical on you, but the engine was 394 cubic inches, which is like 6.5 liters, and produced 345 horsepower. Most young people today have never been in any car even half this powerful. It was an ultra-high compression engine called, appropriately, the Rocket 88, and man, it was a rocket. The sounds that you heard when you were accelerating were like music to a young guy's ears, a deep, throaty growling of a sound. If you were walking and you heard this sound, you would absolutely look around to see where it was coming from, because you knew you were going to see one bad boy coming down the street. This car had an automatic transmission, as all big cars in America did. But something that this transmission had that other cars did not was a gear labeled as S, and this stood for super. When you put this car into super, it would travel like a rocket. On many occasions, I had this car up to 130 miles an hour. That's about 210 kilometers an hour. The speedometer only went to 120 miles an hour, but I could bury the needle and see it bounce. Tire technology then was not nearly as good as today, so traveling at this speed for more than a couple of minutes was risky business. It would be too easy to have a blowout, which would certainly kill you at this speed. You know, I'd like to try to talk about the power of this car and how it feels, but I could sit here trying to describe it for an hour, and you could never guess it. You really need to experience it. About the closest I can come to describing it is when you're in a powerful jet on the runway and it's just ready to take off and it's blasting down that runway, gathering unreal speed, and you're pressed into the back of your seat. You can't sit up if you wanted to. That's what it was like. Only with a plane, we only get to experience this sometimes. When you own the car, you can experience it anytime you want. It was just fantastic. The interior of this car was quite large. Both the front and rear seats were what we call bench seats, and were like having a couple of sofas in the car. There was easily enough room to fit 6 big guys in the car, 3 in front and 3 in the back, really very comfortably. And believe me, I did. I mean, I had friends of mine, there'd be 6 of us in this car, and we would go somewhere, 3-4 hour drive, no problem, very comfortable. Regardless of how your car looked or how fast it could go, the most important thing about your car in those days was the sound system. Yeah, some things never change, huh? This was before the days of MP3s, CDs, and even cassette tapes. In those days, we had 8-track players. 8-track players actually had advantages over the soon-to-be cassette tapes, such as sound quality, plus the tape was a continuous loop, which meant that it never had to be flipped. But the main disadvantage was the size of the tapes, or the cassettes. They were about 4 times the volume of the cassette tapes. So when the cassettes were introduced, the 8-track players became dinosaurs. It would take hours and hours to begin even to explain about the car connection in America. Part of the reason for the love affair with the car is that most Americans do not live in cities, and in fact have no public transportation. So without a car, a young person has less of a social life. Just cruising or hanging out was always a common pastime with American teens. If you were cruising with friends, they were usually expected to cough it up. I know that when you are learning English, you are typically taught that 2 things that have gender in English are cars and ships. This is not entirely true. While we do often think of our cars as female, we rarely refer to the car as she. That would sound pretty weird, and we usually refer to the car as it. But I will tell you, if you're having problems with your car, or trying to fix it or something, really, you do use gender when you're yelling at your car or whatever. I don't know why. So in this picture also, you can see me in a Chevy Corvette, which is a great American car, great American sports car, and you don't see too many of them elsewhere in the world. Something else that people need to know is in America, the highway system is really good. America is a large country, and you can go anywhere by car, and very often the journey is the best part of the trip, just the getting there. Okay, now time for some of our new vocabulary. Joyriding. Joyriding is really driving around without an aim, without a goal, without a destination, just for the pleasure of driving. A sleeper. In the context of this video, it means a car that doesn't look really special or anything. It doesn't even look fast, but then it surprises with you how fast and powerful it is. Souped up. These are when you make mechanical modifications to a car to increase its speed and performance. Muscle car. These were very powerful and fast cars made only in America back in the 1960s and 1970s. Actually, now there's a resurgence. Some of these muscle cars that used to be made are being re-released in a modified form. That's because of the baby boomers. The people who grew up at that time are now older and can afford a new model of a car that had such pleasant memories for them. To bury the needle. That means to go so fast in a car that the needle on the speedometer can't go any further and will actually bounce back and forth at the very end. Blowout. Here it refers to a car tire exploding and falling apart due to heat and speed. It can be really dangerous at a high speed. It can kill you. To become a dinosaur. That means to become extinct. To be no longer produced, bought, wanted, or needed. Hanging out. That means to spend time with someone. Usually we say hanging out with friends. Very often here in Russia, people will say, I walked with my friends. This is absolutely incorrect in English. You should say, I was hanging out with my friends. Unless you're just physically describing the physical act of walking. But if you were walking, sitting, talking, going places, you weren't walking with your friends. You were hanging out. To cough it up. To give something you may not want to give. In this case, I refer to a group of friends all needing to contribute money for gasoline. Okay, you've got this group of friends in your car. You're the same age. You're 16. They're in the car. They're expected to cough it up. You might say, hey, come on, cough it up. I need to get gas. I don't want any freeloaders here. A freeloader would just be somebody who expects to ride for free without contributing at all. As always, thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope that I was able to share a little insight into American life in the 1970s and what it was like growing up then. I hope that you return to see my next video, as soon as I make another one, that is. Until that time, this is Mark in Russia Presents saying goodbye.